Olivia hadn't slept properly in 6 days. Not since the first whisper. Not since she woke at exactly 3:17 in the morning to hear her name spoken softly in the hallway outside her bedroom door. She told herself it was a dream bleeding into wakefulness, that half-conscious state where the mind plays tricks. But the clock on her nightstand glowed with unmistakable clarity. 3:17. And the voice had been so close, so deliberate. The house was old, but not ancient. Built in 1973, purchased by her late Aunt Margaret 3 years before Olivia was born. Margaret had lived there alone for 42 years, dying peacefully in her sleep just 8 months ago. The house passed to Olivia, the only niece who'd bothered to visit more than once a year. Olivia moved in during late August, grateful for the space, the quiet, the distance from her previous life. The neighborhood was calm. Trees lined the street. Children rode bicycles in the early evening. Nothing about the house suggested anything other than decades of ordinary existence. Until 3:17 in the morning, 6 days ago. Olivia lay in bed now, staring at the ceiling. The house settled around her with its usual sounds. The refrigerator hummed downstairs. Pipes ticked softly in the walls. Outside, wind pushed through the branches of the oak tree near the driveway. She'd learned these sounds over the past 3 months, cataloged them, grown comfortable with them. But she couldn't stop watching the clock. 2:48, 2:51, 3:03. She told herself she wouldn't hear it again. 6 nights in a row was enough to establish a pattern, but patterns could break. Random chance could cluster events together. The rational part of her mind insisted on this. Michael had said the same thing when she called him yesterday afternoon.
You're stressed. New house, grieving your aunt, sleeping in a place where someone died recently. Your brain is processing all of that. It's creating auditory hallucinations in that twilight state between sleep and waking. It's textbook.
Michael was her older brother, a psychiatrist with a calm voice and an explanation for everything. He'd always been that way, even as children. When Olivia saw shadows move in her childhood bedroom, Michael explained light refraction and tired eyes. When she swore she heard footsteps in the attic, he pointed out thermal expansion in the wooden beams. He was usually right. Olivia wanted him to be right now. 3:12. Her heart rate increased despite her efforts to remain calm. She focused on her breathing. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. A technique Michael had taught her years ago. It helped with anxiety, with panic attacks, with the mind's tendency to spiral. She repeated it. In, hold, out. 3:15. The house was silent in a way that felt deliberate. No settling sounds. No refrigerator hum. Even the wind outside seemed to have paused. Olivia's skin prickled. She kept her eyes on the ceiling, but her awareness spread throughout the room, searching for any change, any movement, any sound. 3:16. She wanted to close her eyes, to force herself back towards sleep, to refuse participation in whatever was happening. But she couldn't. Her body wouldn't allow it. Every nerve was alert, waiting. 3:17. The whisper came from directly outside her bedroom door, spoken clearly in the darkness of the hallway. Olivia. Not a question, not a call, just her name, stated with quiet certainty, as if confirming her presence. The voice was female, soft, almost gentle. It didn't sound threatening. That was what unsettled Olivia most. The tone carried no malice, no urgency. It was the voice of someone who knew her, speaking to her the way an old friend might when entering a room. Olivia didn't move. She stared at the closed bedroom door, her breathing shallow now, forgotten technique abandoned. The digital clock glowed. 3:17. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The silence returned, complete and heavy. Olivia waited for something else. Footsteps, a door opening, any indication of movement. Nothing came. She sat up slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The room was exactly as it had been when she turned off the lamp 3 hours ago. Her clothes draped over the chair in the corner. Books stacked on the dresser. The door remained closed, its white surface barely visible in the darkness. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, activated the flashlight, and aimed it at the door. The beam revealed nothing unusual, just painted wood and a brass handle. Olivia stood, moved to the door, and pressed her ear against it. Silence. She gripped the handle and pulled the door open quickly, shining the light into the hallway. Empty. The bathroom door to her left stood open, darkness inside. The stairs at the end of the hall descended into more darkness. To her right, the hallway extended past 2 more bedrooms and ended at a linen closet. All doors closed, all exactly as she'd left them before bed. She stepped into the hallway bare feet on cold hardwood. The beam from her phone swept left, then right. Nothing. She walked to the stairs and aimed the light down into the living room. Furniture sat motionless in the weak glow. The front door remained locked, chain in place. She checked each upstairs room, turning on lights, looking in closets, behind doors. Every space was empty. Olivia returned to her bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. 3:32. She tried to reconstruct what she'd heard. A whisper, her name, outside her door. She'd been awake, not dreaming, fully conscious, watching the clock, waiting. The voice had been real. She was certain. But Michael's words circled in her thoughts. Stress, grief, hallucination, the mind creating patterns, filling silence with familiar sounds. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, doubt had crept in. Daylight had a way of softening certainty, making night fears seem foolish. Olivia made coffee, ate toast, checked her email. Normal activities. The house looked entirely benign in the September sunshine, streaming through the kitchen windows. She walked through each room again, searching for anything that might explain the voice. Heating vents that could carry sound from outside, old pipes that might create voice-like echoes, electronic devices that could produce unexpected noises. She found nothing conclusive. That afternoon, she called Daniel. Daniel was 83, a widower who'd lived next door to Aunt Margaret for 37 years. He'd brought Olivia a casserole the day she moved in, welcomed her to the neighborhood, offered help if she needed anything. He was kind in the quiet way elderly neighbors often are, not intrusive, but present. Olivia had spoken to him several times since August, mostly brief conversations about the weather or the neighborhood. She'd never asked him about Margaret directly. It felt intrusive somehow, discussing her aunt with someone who'd known her far longer than Olivia had. But now she needed information. Daniel answered on the third ring, his voice weathered but clear.
Olivia, good to hear from you. Everything all right over there?
Yes, well, mostly. I wanted to ask you something about Aunt Margaret, about the house.
A pause on the line. Background noise of a television being muted.
Of course. What would you like to know?
Did Margaret ever mention anything unusual happening in the house? Strange sounds, or anything she couldn't explain?
Another pause, longer this time.
What kind of sounds?
Voices, maybe, at night.
The silence stretched. Olivia heard Daniel breathing, a soft wheeze that suggested decades of smoking.
She mentioned something once. Years ago, I'd almost forgotten.
Olivia's grip tightened on the phone.
What did she say?
This was probably 15 years back. We were having coffee in her kitchen and she looked tired. I asked if she was sleeping all right. She said she kept waking at the same time every night. Said she thought she heard someone calling her name. I told her it was probably just dreams. She agreed, never brought it up again.
Did she say what time she woke up?
She did, actually. I remember because it was such a specific detail. 3:17. I remember thinking that was oddly precise for someone describing a recurring dream.
Olivia's skin went cold.
Did she ever seem frightened? Did she ever try to leave the house?
Number Margaret lived there until the day she died. She never seemed afraid of the place, just tired sometimes. We all get tired.
They spoke for a few more minutes, but Olivia barely registered the conversation. She thanked Daniel and ended the call, then sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. Margaret had heard it too. The same time. The same phenomenon, 15 years ago, maybe longer. And she'd stayed, lived with it, died in this house with whatever was calling her name at 3:17 every morning. Olivia felt the weight of that knowledge settle over her. This wasn't new. This wasn't her mind creating patterns from grief and stress. This was something that had existed in the house for years, something Margaret had learned to live with or ignore, something patient. That night, Olivia left every light in the house on. She sat in the living room with her laptop, researching the house's history. Property records showed the house built in 73 by a contractor named Thomas Brennan, sold to its first owner in 74, then sold to Margaret in 82. The first owner had been a family, the Colemans, who'd lived there for 8 years. No records of deaths, no police reports, no local news articles mentioning the address. Just an ordinary house with an ordinary history. Except for the voice at 317. Olivia didn't want to be in her bedroom that night. The thought of lying in darkness, waiting for the whisper, made her nauseous. But sitting downstairs felt like avoidance, like hiding. She needed to understand what was happening, needed to confirm whether this was real, or if her mind was genuinely unraveling. She climbed the stairs at 2:30, entered her bedroom, but didn't turn off the lights. She lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, phone in hand. The house hummed with its usual sounds, amplified now by her heightened awareness. Every creak was analyzed, every settling noise examined for meaning. Time crawled. 317 approached. Olivia held her phone ready, video recording activated, pointed at the bedroom door. If the voice came, she'd have evidence. Something to show Michael. Something to prove she wasn't hallucinating. Her finger hovered over the screen, ready to start recording. 3:15. The house went silent. The same deliberate silence as the night before. Olivia started the recording, aimed the phone at the door. The lens captured the white paint, the brass handle, the narrow gap at the bottom, where light from the hallway seeped through. 3:17. Olivia. The whisper was clearer this time, more distinct. Olivia's hand shook, but she kept the phone steady, recording. The voice had come from the hallway, just outside the door. She was certain. She stopped the recording, played it back immediately. The footage showed the door. Silent, no voice, just the door and the ambient sound of the room's stillness. Olivia played it again, volume at maximum. Nothing. The whisper wasn't there. She felt panic rising, irrational but overwhelming. She'd heard it clearly. The phone had been recording, but the audio captured nothing. She checked the phone's settings, confirmed it was working properly, recorded her own voice saying test words. The playback was clear. The phone functioned perfectly, but it hadn't captured the whisper. Olivia didn't sleep. She sat against the headboard, lights on, door closed, waiting for dawn. Her mind raced through possibilities. Frequency ranges beyond the phone's microphone capabilities. Sound that existed only in specific locations. Auditory processing errors in her brain. None of it made sense. None of it explained why Margaret had heard the same thing for years. By morning, Olivia had made a decision. She called Michael.
Olivia, it's 6 in the morning.
I need you to come to the house. Stay tonight. 3:17. You need to hear it yourself.
Michael agreed, probably out of concern for his sister's mental state rather than belief in whispered voices. He arrived that evening with an overnight bag and his rational explanations fully prepared. They ate dinner together, Olivia barely tasting the food, Michael talking about patience and hospital politics. He was calm, measured, completely unconcerned about the approaching night. At 2:30, they positioned themselves in Olivia's bedroom. Michael sat in the chair by the window, Olivia on the bed. They'd left the door partially open, lights off this time at Michael's insistence. He wanted to replicate the conditions exactly as Olivia had experienced them. She didn't argue. They waited in darkness and silence. 3:05, 3:10, 3:15. Michael checked his watch, the face glowing briefly in the darkness. Olivia watched the doorway, the strip of hallway visible through the gap. Her heart hammered. She wanted Michael to hear it, needed him to hear it, needed confirmation she wasn't losing her mind. 3:17. Olivia. The whisper came from the hallway, soft and clear. Olivia jerked upright, looked at Michael. He sat motionless in the chair, staring at the door. Several seconds passed. He didn't move. Olivia's voice came out strangled.
Did you hear that?
Michael turned to her slowly.
No, I didn't hear anything.
Olivia felt something break inside her chest. Tears came without warning, hot and sudden. Michael stood, crossed to the bed, sat beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders, and she sobbed against him, terrified not of the whisper, but of what it meant that only she could hear it.
It's okay. We'll figure this out. You're exhausted. You're grieving. Your brain is under enormous stress. This is treatable, Olivia. You're not losing your mind.
But his words felt hollow. She'd heard her name spoken clearly, and he'd heard nothing. The voice was real to her, absent to him. That meant one of two things. Either something was wrong with her perception, or the whisper was somehow selective, choosing who could hear it. Both possibilities were terrifying. Michael stayed the rest of the night, sleeping in the guest room. In the morning, he made breakfast and gently suggested Olivia see his colleague, a neurologist who specialized in auditory disorders. He mentioned temporal lobe epilepsy, hypnagogic hallucinations, even the possibility of a small stroke affecting her auditory cortex. Medical explanations, treatable conditions, nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. Olivia agreed to the appointment, scheduled for the following week. Michael left that afternoon, promising to check in daily. After he was gone, Olivia stood in the silent house and felt the weight of isolation settle over her. No one else could hear the whisper. Whatever was happening, she was alone with it. The next few nights followed the same pattern. 3:17. The whisper. Her name spoken softly in the darkness outside her door. Sometimes it came from the hallway. Twice, it seemed to originate from the stairs. Once, she could have sworn it came from inside her closet, though when she checked, the closet was empty, her clothes hanging motionless on their hangers. The voice never varied in tone, always female, always soft, always the same single word, Olivia. Never a question, never a demand, just her name, spoken as if in recognition. She began losing time during the day. Not in any dramatic way. Just moments where she'd find herself standing in a room with no memory of walking there, or sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, unable to remember making it. Small gaps, nothing alarming on its own, but accumulating into a general sense of disconnection. The neurologist appointment came. Dr. Patterson was thorough, running tests, asking questions, examining Olivia with practiced efficiency. The results showed nothing abnormal, no lesions, no seizure activity, no signs of stroke or tumor. Her brain was healthy. Her hearing was perfect. Dr. Patterson suggested stress counseling, prescribed mild sleeping medication, and sent her home with reassurances that sounded increasingly empty. Olivia stopped trying to record the whispers, stopped trying to prove anything. She simply waited each night for 3:17, heard her name, and lay awake until morning. The exhaustion was becoming physical now. Her hands shook, her vision blurred at the edges. She lost weight without noticing. On the 15th night, something changed. The whisper came at 3:17, as expected. But this time, after speaking her name, the voice continued. Olivia, come here. 2 additional words, spoken with the same soft certainty. Come here, an invitation, a request. Olivia sat frozen in bed, staring at the door. The voice had never said more than her name before. This was new. This was escalation. She didn't move, didn't respond. After several minutes of silence, she finally lay back down, but sleep was impossible. The words repeated in her mind. Come here. Where? To the door? To the hallway? Downstairs? The voice hadn't specified. It had simply assumed she would know. The next night, 3:17 brought a variation. Olivia, I've been waiting. The whisper carried a note of patience, of expectation, as if Olivia had been invited to something and was overdue. She pulled the covers up to her chin, childish protection against nothing. The voice wasn't threatening. That was what disturbed her most. It sounded almost sad, almost disappointed. Night 18 brought another change. Olivia, I know you hear me. Acknowledgement. The voice knew she was listening, knew she was aware. Olivia's breath caught. This wasn't random. This wasn't her mind creating patterns. This was intentional. Something was speaking to her specifically, knowingly, with full awareness of her presence. She couldn't stay in the house anymore. That night, after the whisper faded, Olivia packed a bag and drove to a hotel near the highway. She checked in at 4 in the morning, collapsed on the unfamiliar bed, and slept for 12 hours straight. When she woke, she called the front desk and extended her stay for a week. For 6 nights, Olivia slept in the hotel. No whispers, no 3:17 disturbances, Just ordinary sleep in an ordinary room. She began to feel human again. The shaking stopped. Her appetite returned. Michael called daily and seemed relieved by the improvement in her voice. She told him she was taking a break from the house, getting perspective. He encouraged this. But on the 7th night in the hotel, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, Olivia woke to a whisper beside her bed. "Olivia, come home." She sat up, gasping, and turned on every light in the room. Empty. The hotel room was empty. She checked the bathroom, behind the curtains, in the closet. Nothing. But she'd heard it clearly. The same voice. The same tone. Not in the house. Here, the presence had followed her. Olivia checked out before dawn, drove back to the house through gray morning light. She understood now. Distance didn't matter. The presence wasn't bound to the house. It was bound to her. Or she was bound to it. The connection existed regardless of location. She entered the house and felt a strange sense of resignation. Whatever this was, wherever it came from, it wasn't going to leave her alone. She could run to hotels, to other cities, to other states. The whisper would find her at 3:17. It always would. That evening, Olivia returned to Daniel's house. She needed to know more about Margaret, about how her aunt had lived with this for years without breaking. Daniel invited her in, made tea, and they sat in his living room while autumn darkness gathered outside.
You said Margaret woke up at 3:17 for years. Did she ever seem frightened?
Not frightened, no. Tired, like I said, but there was something else.
Daniel paused, staring into his tea.
Toward the end, the last few months before she died, Margaret seemed almost peaceful, more peaceful than I'd seen her in years. I asked her once if she was feeling all right, and she said yes, said she'd made peace with things. I assumed she meant age, mortality, the usual end-of-life acceptance. But now, talking to you, I wonder if she meant something else.
Did she ever mention a name, someone from her past?
Not that I recall. Margaret kept to herself mostly, never married, no children. She had you and your family, but that was about it. She lived a quiet life.
Olivia thanked him and returned home. The house was dark, except for the porch light. She stood on the front steps for a long moment before going inside. The knowledge that Margaret had found peace with whatever this was should have been comforting. Instead, it unsettled Olivia deeply. What kind of peace required accepting whispers at 3:17 every morning? What had Margaret surrendered to? That night, Olivia didn't go to bed. She sat in the living room with a box of Margaret's personal belongings she'd stored in the basement. Old photographs, letters, documents. She'd planned to sort through them eventually, but there'd been no urgency. Now, she searched for anything that might explain the connection between Margaret and the voice. Most of the contents were mundane. Tax documents, birthday cards, photographs of family gatherings Olivia vaguely remembered attending as a child. But near the bottom of the box, she found a small leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Margaret's handwriting filled the pages, dated entries spanning decades. Olivia flipped through carefully, scanning for anything relevant. Most entries were brief observations about daily life. But one entry, dated August 12, 1994, made her stop. The entry read, "She called my name again last night. 3:17, same as always. I've stopped being afraid. I think she just wants me to remember. After all these years, I think that's all she wants, for someone to remember." Olivia read the entry 3 times. She, Margaret, had known the voice was female, had known it for years. And Margaret believed the voice wanted to be remembered. But remembered as what? As who? Olivia continued reading. Entries from later years showed Margaret's gradual acceptance. October 2nd, 2003. I answered her tonight. Just said yes. I hear you. She didn't say anything else, but I felt something shift. Maybe that's all she needed. January 17th, 2011. 29 years now. I've lived more than half my life with her voice. Sometimes I think she's more real than anyone I see during the day. More constant, anyway. The final entry was dated 3 months before Margaret's death. April 30th. I'm tired. Not of her, but of everything else. She's the only constant thing in my life now. Everyone else is gone. I think when my time comes, I'll hear her voice, and it won't be in the hallway anymore. It'll be closer. Maybe that's what she's been preparing me for. Maybe that's what 3:17 has always meant. The time when walls get thin, when we can reach across. Olivia closed the journal and sat in the quiet living room as understanding settled over her. Margaret hadn't been tormented by the voice. She'd found companionship in it. After decades of solitude, the whisper at 3:17 had become a reliable presence, something familiar in an increasingly empty life. Margaret had made peace not despite the voice, but because of it. But that didn't explain who the voice belonged to, or why it now spoke to Olivia. 3:17 approached. Olivia remained downstairs, journal in her lap. When the moment came, the whisper emerged from the staircase, drifting down into the living room. Olivia, you found the journal. Olivia's blood went cold. The voice knew. It was aware not just of her presence, but of her actions. She forced herself to speak, her voice cracking.
Who are you?
Silence long and complete, then softer than before. You don't remember me, but I remember you.
I don't understand. We've never met.
We have. You were very young, too young to remember. But I was there. Olivia's hands trembled. She tried to think back, to childhood memories, to any female figure who might have been present and then absent. Nothing came.
Tell me who you are.
The whisper came again, and this time Olivia heard something in it she hadn't noticed before. Not menace, loneliness. My name was Amelia. I was your Aunt Margaret's sister. Olivia's mind reeled. Margaret had been an only child. Olivia's mother had confirmed this years ago when Olivia asked about family history. Margaret had no siblings, no sister named Amelia.
That's not possible. Margaret didn't have a sister.
She did for 3 months. I died before I turned 1. They don't talk about babies who don't survive. The family never mentioned me after, but Margaret remembered. She was 5 when I was born, old enough to remember having a baby sister, old enough to remember losing one. Olivia felt tears on her face without knowing when she'd started crying. The pieces were falling into place. A sister who died in infancy, a death no one spoke about, a grief that became family silence, and Margaret carrying that memory alone for decades.
Why do you call my name? Why now?
Because you live here now, in the house where Margaret kept me alive. She talked to me sometimes when no one was listening. She told me about the family, about you. She showed me your pictures. I watched you grow up through her stories, and when she died, you came here. You're all that's left of us. The whisper faded, leaving Olivia alone in the living room with the journal and the weight of generational grief. Amelia wasn't haunting the house. She was mourning it, mourning the loss of the only person who'd remembered her existence. And now, in desperation or loneliness, she'd reached out to Olivia, the last connection to a family that had erased her. Olivia didn't sleep that night. She sat with the journal, reading every entry about Amelia, piecing together Margaret's secret relationship with a sister who existed only in whispers, and 3:17 moments when the living and dead could briefly touch. The next night at 3:17, Olivia was ready. She sat in the upstairs hallway, back against the wall, waiting. The whisper came, closer than ever before. Olivia.
I'm here, Amelia. I hear you. I know who you are.
Silence, then barely audible. You believe me?
Yes, Margaret never forgot you. She kept you with her all these years, and now I know about you too. You're not forgotten.
The silence that followed was different. Not empty, but full. Present. Olivia felt something in the air shift, a subtle change in pressure or temperature. When the whisper came again, it was softer, almost relieved. Thank you. The presence didn't disappear after that night. 3:17 still brought Amelia's voice, still pulled Olivia from sleep. But the tone changed. The whispers became less urgent, less persistent. Sometimes Amelia spoke. Sometimes she simply said Olivia's name and fell silent, as if checking in, confirming connection. Olivia learned to sleep through most nights, waking briefly at 3:17, acknowledging Amelia's presence, then drifting back to sleep. It became routine, not comfortable exactly, but familiar, a strange inheritance from Margaret. This relationship with a voice that existed in the thin hours of early morning. Michael never understood. He continued suggesting treatments, medications, therapies designed to eliminate the whispers. Olivia stopped arguing with him. Some experiences couldn't be explained to people who hadn't lived them. Some presences couldn't be rationally dismissed regardless of how impossible they seemed. Months passed. Autumn became winter. Snow covered the yard, muffled the street sounds, made the house feel even more isolated. Olivia grew accustomed to her life with Amelia. They didn't have conversations exactly. Amelia's vocabulary remained limited, her presence bound by whatever rules governed such things. But there was communication, understanding. One night in January, nearly 5 months after the whispers began, Olivia woke before 3:17. She lay in bed, watching the clock, waiting. When the moment came, Amelia's voice emerged not from the hallway, but from beside the bed, close enough that Olivia could have touched the source, if sources could be touched. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." This was new. Amelia had never prefaced her words this way before. Olivia sat up, alert.
"I'm listening."
"Margaret stayed because she thought I needed her. But I don't need you to stay. I'm not holding you here. You can leave if you want. I'll be all right." Olivia felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. Amelia was offering release, permission to abandon the house and the strange relationship they'd formed. It was a gift, an act of grace from someone who'd spent decades existing only in whispers.
"What if I don't want to leave?"
Silence, long enough that Olivia thought Amelia might not answer. Then I won't be alone anymore." Olivia lay back down, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. She thought about her life before the house, a small apartment in the city, a job she tolerated, friends she saw occasionally, nothing permanent, nothing that felt like home. The house, despite its strangeness, had become something she hadn't expected. A place where she was needed, where her presence mattered to someone, even if that someone existed only at 3:17 in the morning.
"I'm not going anywhere, Amelia. You're stuck with me."
The whisper that came next was so quiet Olivia almost missed it. "Thank you." They existed together after that. Olivia and Amelia, the living and the remembered. 3:17 became less of an intrusion and more of a touchstone, a moment each night when Olivia confirmed she wasn't alone. And neither was Amelia. The house settled into its rhythms. Time passed. Seasons changed. The whispers continued. Olivia never told anyone the full truth. Michael believed she'd learned to manage her auditory hallucinations. Daniel thought she'd adjusted to living in Margaret's house. Neither understood that Olivia hadn't adjusted to anything. She'd simply accepted a reality that existed outside their comprehension. Some houses hold more than furniture and memories. Some presences are too persistent to be dismissed as delusion or grief. On a night in late March, nearly 9 months after the whispers began, Olivia woke at 3:17 to find Amelia's voice different, clearer, more present than it had ever been. "Olivia, can you see me?" Olivia opened her eyes and looked toward the foot of her bed. For just a moment, less than a second, she saw something. Not a full figure, but an impression. The suggestion of a child, small and translucent, watching her with dark eyes. Then it was gone, leaving only the familiar darkness and the whisper.
I saw you just for a moment.
I'm getting stronger. Or maybe you're getting better at seeing. I'm not sure which, but thank you for looking. Olivia smiled in the darkness. A year ago, the sight would have terrified her. Now it felt like progress, like deepening connection. She was living with a ghost, and somehow that had become the most meaningful relationship in her life. The whispers at 317 continued. They always would. Olivia understood that now. This was her inheritance. Not just the house, but the presence within it. The voice that called her name in the thin hours of morning. The reminder that some connections transcend death. That some promises outlast the people who made them. Margaret had kept Amelia alive through remembering. Now Olivia would do the same. Not out of obligation, but out of something deeper. Recognition, kinship, the understanding that in a world of temporary things, some presences were worth preserving, even if they only existed in whispers at 3:17 in the morning. The house was never empty. Olivia knew that now. It never had been, not since Amelia's death decades before she was born. The walls held memory. The darkness held voice. And at 3:17 every morning, the barrier between worlds grew thin enough for a child who'd lived only 3 months to reach across and confirm what Margaret had known all along. Some things survive death through sheer force of love. Some voices refuse to be silenced by time or forgetting. And some houses become sanctuaries, not for the living, but for those who exist in the spaces between, waiting patiently for someone to acknowledge their presence and whisper back into the darkness. I'm here, I hear you, you're not alone.